Hi, my name's Amanda Needham, and I'm the Managing Director of the Telly Awards. I am super excited to welcome everybody to our recent through lines of the season, How to Fund Your Film. Today, we're going to be going over the state of funding in film, from the challenges facing film communities to what excites folks most about film in their communities. I'm going to speak for about 30 minutes with some incredible guests. You will have time to ask questions. So if you do have questions or comments or things you want to go deeper on, you can type them in the comments on LinkedIn or whatever platform you're joining from. And then my team will bring them up at the end and we'll be sure to get to them then. Also, if at any point during the screening or the conversation you are curious about what we're talking about, you can scan the QR code in the bottom left of the screen, and our team will follow up with any resources mentioned during this chat in an email at the end. So let's dig in. I am Amanda. I'm the Managing Director of the Telly Awards, and the Telly's honors excellence in video and television across all screens. We've been doing it since 1979, and we really look at the full breadth of work being made in film and television. And if you're making film and television, we're currently open through entries through the end of March. But today is one of our events where we dig into sort of the through lines that connect the various aspects of our industry. And we're going to be digging into film funding, particularly for independent films, but also alternative models for any sort of film you might be making. And we're going to dig into that conversation with state film communities and talk about what's challenging, what the structure currently is, and what's changing about the funding models for films. I am really excited about this conversation because it's not just about how to get money for your film, but it's about really the opportunities and the challenges and the realities that are framing collectively how funding for film works. So really understanding that ecosystem is what excites me to bring to you. And also it's because at the Tellys, we see so many different types of work being made that are not traditional, that understanding sort of how that traditional model works and how it's shifting, I think is useful to understand how new forms of projects are going to be made in the future. So without further ado, I would like to welcome onto the stage my two guests today. We're going to be joined by Tim Williams, who is the Executive Director of Oregon Film. Oregon Film is the state economic development agency for film and television in Oregon. Film and media production in Oregon. And I'm also going to be joined by Shauna Schultz, who is a Telly judge and the Vice President of the Colorado Film and Video Association, the state's film industry membership organization, which was founded in 1982 and represents hundreds of filmmakers across the state of Colorado. So this is a conversation with both of you. I love both of your perspectives. We have here sort of like a top down, this is how the system works or should work. We have a bottom up rearranging how states could and should operate. And hopefully together, we're going to dig into a little bit about what's being made, how it's being made, and how it could be made. So Tim, let's frame this. Let's get a little background from both of you. We like to kick off this through line series with a conversation starter. Our question is around what is original about what you do. The theme this year at the Tellys is capture the original, and we're sort of trying to understand the ethos behind what you do and also the potential of the moment. So Tim, tell us a little bit about what's original about Oregon Film in your perspective.
Well, I would say that first of all, thank you for having us. This is really great. I've enjoyed all the panels thus far. So we are the oldest state film office in the United States. And my background is actually from production. So I was a producer for many years. So I like to say that the thing that makes us original is that I sort of have a production friendly attitude, and I do all the talking, and I do all the contracting, and I do all the budgets. And one of the things we do up front that I don't think anybody else does is I'll go through the budget, even if you're not going to come here, I'll go through it and sort of tag it for Oregon rebates so that you can see what you're going to get and compare it against other places. And it's usually pretty accurate. And we are a cash rebate. So although we are not the highest percentage in the country, we actually are the fastest to pay out. And so if you're a small company or a small project that actually needs the cash at some point in time, it'll come to you within 4 to 6 weeks. It's not going to take 2 or 3 years as some other places do. On top of that, we're easy to get in and out of. We have airports in Portland, Eugene, and Medford, and Bend. So that's a very easy flight from wherever you are. And we're not Canada, so you don't have to go through customs to get here. So that's always very nice. And we have lots of different terrains, from oceans to rivers to mountains to high desert to forests, you name it, we sort of have it. So I know a lot of state agencies say that and a lot of state film commissions say that, but we actually walk the walk. And on top of that, we have a 110-year history of production. So there actually were silent movie studios here in Oregon before they were in Southern California. They soon realized that the weather was much better in Southern California, so they moved. But we have a 110-year history of making films, and that's the next thing that I'll show you is a quick sort of film about our history of filmmaking.
Awesome. Cool.
Ohio, there's a girl I used to know.
Auspicious beginnings, you know what I mean?
Sorry.
Don't say that! Never say that! Goonies never say die!
I know. I'll put a bird on it. That's awesome. I got goosebumps, honestly, Tim, when you see all of those together. It's like the Goonies, Stand By Me, Free Willy, Portlandia, Wild. You see all of them, but also it's like it's both culture and history, but it's also like real money, like high level production in state with wagon trains. And that I don't know. It's like there's so many layers to what it means to make a film in a place, and so we're going to get into all of that. But Shauna, why don't you give us sort of the bottom up perspective as a filmmaker in the state of Colorado? How are you all orienting kind of as a collective towards how to fund the work that's coming out of all the members that are like locally there, as opposed to coming in? I know that Oregon funds local folks as well, very much so, but also like sort of big productions that come in from out of state. How do you, what's the ground up perspective from the filmmaker's perspective on how to approach funding in this modern context?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again for having us. So the Colorado Film and Video Association, the CFVA, is Colorado's oldest industry membership organization. founded back in 1982, as you had said, and it's fully volunteer-led and always has been, aiming to connect members to work in our state. And it really began as the Colorado Film Crew Directory. It was modeled after the LA 411, and the goal was to really get people hired and to bring, when work was here, which it was. We had a lot of TV production during that time here in the state. The crew, we needed to say, who can you hire when you come here, because we're well equipped. Well, things have changed a lot over the last 40 years. And in October of 2022, the film study was released here in Colorado. So there was a film study funded. And as I was going through that, and I was actually meeting with a group of women producers and directors in January of 23 at Sundance, and we were realizing that we really needed to change the way things were done. And how could we come together and spark a grassroots movement to help ourselves? Our kind of mantra is, we are who we've been waiting for. Is like, no one else is just coming to save us. I think we just need to come together. And so that's what sparked the first statewide town hall. So I'd love to show you a video of the 2024 town hall.
Welcome, everybody. This is the inaugural Film and Media Industry Town Hall.
The Colorado film scene is growing, and we're excited to be a part of it.
I feel like it's important to have my voice heard in this community.
We all rally together and try to help each other achieve our goals.
By the end of today's conversation, the hope is that you've learned something new, you've met someone new, and you've found a pillar in our industry that you believe you can take part in growing.
And before you go on and explain, I just want to explain, this is next level roots here, what Shauna is building, I think, in the state of Colorado for like how to build a machine from the bottom up. So that was the start. And then where did you go from there?
Yeah, so my vision was a simultaneous event happening across our state where we can have one conversation and rally around a framework so that we could kind of define what we're now calling the spokes of our flywheel of where you can plug in so that we can grow as an industry together. And so in 2025, this slide is showing, I said, we're going to do it every year. And so I joined forces with the Colorado Film and Video Association and said, could this be what's next for the CFVA? And the board voted unanimously, yes, let's adopt what we're calling the FAMCO initiative. So the film and media community is our FAM. So all the FAMCO things that were going on in 2025, we had 7 cities and over 350 attendees. And then on the next slide, what we realized is how important it would be that it doesn't matter how much the community comes and says, we want these things, unless we're connecting with the leadership of our government, both state and regional, and all of the people that own and run businesses and organizations within the industry. We can't get enough done. We have to go and make sure that we're all on the same page there. So we then led the FAMCO Leadership Summit, where we brought together 25 different organizations across the state. We had 37 leaders come to that, including producers from LA that flew out because they're so interested in coming to Colorado. They just didn't realize we had a thriving film industry, which we're working on. And then on the next slide, this shows the framework that we're working with. So if you'll go to the flywheel, these 6 different spokes of our wheel, I worked with a small task force to really kind of boil down this almost insurmountable task of growing an industry across the state to say, let's really clearly define what are the 6 categories and spokes of our flywheel so that we can get things moving, and what are we trying to do within them. And we're placing the CFVA, the membership organization, in the middle. So we're kind of like the center of that flywheel so that you can come to us as a membership organization and we can connect you. So similar to going all the way back to 1982 of, we are the crew list, is like we can be the connectors within the industry. So that's the direction that we're taking the organization.
Awesome. Well, so let's dig into all of this, because the reality is funding is changing and for films, for independent films as well, and coming up with like a model that is a flywheel that works on multiple aspects of a state's infrastructure is probably necessary. Tim, can you frame a little bit for us as someone that sits sort of at the head of one of the states? What is changing in the state of funding for films in a nutshell?
Well, in a nutshell, everything. We're in a different world now, and we're in a different world that the original funding models don't exist anymore. We're in a consolidation mode and expansion mode. We're in a place where, large corporations are coming together and not only taking over, high-end production, but they're also reducing high-end production. In addition, there's no outlet for smaller projects. And where it leaves a filmmaker is, a little bit with as an existential crisis for sure. But at the same time, it also means you now more than ever have to think about your audience before you ever mount the project. And I think that's the big theme that's here, is that your funding is going to come from who your end user is. And 99 times out of 100, that's not going to be a buyer at a film festival anymore, unfortunately. Film festivals are definitely part of this.
Yeah,
for sure. But that's not where you're going to get a big sale. That's sort of 1 in 1,000 that happens.
And you're saying it used to be that way. That used to be the model. So that
was the model for medium-sized movies. So when I was producing, we were making movies that were like $1 to $8 million, and we would try to get them into Sundance or Toronto or Berlin, and we would try to show them there. We had a sales company, and we were selling foreign territories, and that was a model that was tried and true from the 90s all the way through into, probably 5-6 years ago. And that's changed. You can still do that, but it is much less, it's a much less robust piece of the industry than it was before. I mean, now we're seeing people that are actually building audiences from the onset, and whether they're doing that from scratch and then pushing things through because they've built the audience through social media or crowdsourcing, or whatever the case may be, or maybe they have an audience already because they have a big footprint on Instagram or something like that, and then they're using that to push forward. That seems to be the sort of where we are now. I do believe there's an opportunity here for a platform to find these projects because people want to see them. There is just no outlet right now. And I do believe there's going to be an outlet and it will be monetized. We just haven't found that one yet. There are several that are trying it. There are several that are out there, but there's just not a Fox Searchlight that's doing this, or a Focus that is doing that. And those have been sucked up into larger conglomerations. And
Shauna, I assume you have you run a post house and an amazing sort of you do lots of stuff as a filmmaker and an editor, post person in Colorado. I assume you have felt some of the brunt of this in reality, which is why you're setting up that flywheel, right? Is that sort of, and what are you identifying as what should or could shift to fill some of that traditional gap throughout the process?
Yeah, so Mass Effects Media and 38th and Post is a motion design company and then a post facility, respectively, here in Colorado that I founded. We're going on 15 years this month. We have our anniversary. It has changed so much, and especially for me as a below-the-line vendor, I'm working with producers, directors, and editors, mainly in the documentary space is where we land, but locally here in Colorado because we're in person. And so I think some of the things that we've been seeing, ever since the strikes and then kind of that faux session that happened where everyone was like, we're going into recession, and then we didn't, and then we are, it's been kind of this big waves that are happening. And so we actually saw during the strikes a lot of the documentary work go up. We had more work then, and then a lot of our brand work went down since we spanned both of those places. And I think in my experience with working with the producers who have gotten things sold and have things funded and are coming to us, it's because they have already sold to a lot of the networks, which are now the streamers ultimately. And they're getting, basically the negative pickup model where they've gone and said, hey, we've got this project. And they've said, great, I'll give you X amount flat. And that's it. We own everything, all the rights across the world. And so they're making all of those things and they no longer own what they have. And it's all owned by the streamer. So the motivation of those producers is shrink the budget as much as possible because this is all the income we can get. And so as a below the line vendor, we feel it and it's really difficult. And other places, so on the brand side or different companies are actually starting to get into media and content. So content creators, as Tim was saying, a lot of the producers that are doing more like brand funded films, they might have already found funding there because they have an audience. So maybe they're a creator on YouTube and they have millions of followers. And so this brand comes to them and says, I want you to continue to do what you do, but I'll give you money to do it so that you can put our brand into it. And so those funding models, I really think there's a big place in the brand funded filmmaking, especially for creators.
Tim, as someone who sort of wields the traditional purse strings in a state, I mean, you are a large organization. And so like, you can't shift to like a 5-minute shift in how people are making films today or tomorrow. Like, what are some of the shifts that you think are needed and or are possible when it comes to how some of this work can get funded? Like, what are you seeing work and or be possible within the current system?
Slight correction is we're not a very big organization. We're 4 people.
Okay.
Yes, I work for the largest bureaucracy in Oregon, but I'm what's called a semi-independent agency. So to your point, it means we actually can react quicker than most because we are able to do things a little bit outside of the system. And we are doing that, to be honest. I write some stuff on Substack about it, and I actually just did one about the changing landscape for film commissions, but I did one previously about the localized production that we're seeing. And one of the upsides of what's going on at the moment is that there is a surge in local, smaller productions being done. First-time directors, second-time directors doing branded content, as Shauna said, doing short films, even some that are doing their feature films. You know, I have a lot of people here that are like, 2025 was a disaster and it was bad. But to Shauna's point, there was a huge amount of new product that was being made last year. So, you know, we had a good year in 2024 and we worked with 55 projects in our incentive programs. In 2025, we actually worked with 58 projects, and it was the most we've ever worked with in our incentive program. But our average budget from 24 to 25 went from 4.5 million down to 1.5 million.
There you go.
What we're seeing is a shrinking, as Shauna already talked about, we're seeing a shrinking of the resources because the outlets are less, but we're seeing an uptick in the creation of this product. And so people are doing a lot more with less, especially local. And I think the shift for us as an agency is, how do we fuel that to the best of our ability? We have limited funds, and that's always going to be the challenge, is where do we put those funds? How can we put those funds within regulations and statutes? But how do we make sure that we're still growing a local community and trying to get the larger stuff so we have a top-down, bottom-up sort of sandwich going on? The problem is the midsection of that sandwich is disappearing. It used to be sort of, you know, the 8 to 25 million was the mid zone that was hard. Now it's kind of dropped to like 1 million to 50 million. There's just not a lot going on in there. So as an agency, we've had to shift, and we've had to shift what we do, how we're doing it, how we talk about it, and what we bring to the table.
What's working? Like, so what is coming out of this sort of shrunken section that is interesting or different and or potentially like the way it's happening now?
I don't know yet. I am very encouraged by the feature films that are being made locally. And you know, there's been several here where the filmmakers themselves have brought their audience. So Logic, who's a very large, you know, very well-known rapper, lives in Bend. He did a movie called Paradise Records that went to Tribeca. He famously online said, I got offers, they weren't good enough, I'm gonna do it myself. So he basically marketed Blu-rays directly to his followers and then financed his second movie doing the same way. Similar thing with Squeezy, who's a YouTube personality that lives here, did his first in a totally different movie. Squeezy's a very comedic, you know, and sarcastic, and Logic is very serious, but did the same thing, is made the smaller movie and then sort of went directly to his audience. And he did it by going out to venues and marketing to his audience and having them turn up at venues. We also had somebody that had shot in Eastern Oregon, a small movie that didn't have an audience, but at the very beginning of the process started developing an online footprint, and then basically did this whole large social media campaign as he went through a massive festival campaign to build awareness, and then released it himself on a platform at the other end, but built his audience while he was flying the plane, basically. And I'm very encouraged by all that. And I don't yet know what button is working. I'm trying, as they say, a lot of pasta against the wall and the ceiling and seeing what sticks. And sometimes it sticks for a little while and sometimes it falls on the floor.
but that is structurally different than before. You would have it just, I mean, literally audience first, build it as you go. I mean, that means that you're not really a filmmaker. You're all the things. You're wearing all the hats. You're not just someone with an idea and a crew.
Which is what we're seeing online as well. The creators, as Shauna mentioned, creators are all of that. You can't just be a pure creative these days. Unfortunately, I would have loved to say you can, but also what's unique about your voice and your creation, whether that is a feature film, a short film, a branded piece of content, a vertical, we have a whole vertical thing going on now, for better or worse. So what is your voice? What is the thing you do? And as a film office, we're asking the same question. What's unique about us? What can we do? And the one thing I can point to is we're fast paying cash rebates. So if you're a small project and you need money to complete or something like that, we usually can help you with that. And we also run grant programs, but even those are limited. But, I think at this point in time, it's an injection of cash where you can do it. That's basically it. And then support in the building of the audience. Can we use our social media outlets, our blog, our newsletter to help you get that awareness out in some way, shape, or form? It's not huge, but, we have 5,000 followers on Instagram. So it's something,
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of what's coming up through the shoots and or what's possible, Shauna, what are you seeing sort of being made or new avenues for stuff to be made? I mean, Sundance is coming to Colorado. Is that what are you meeting that moment? Is that, I don't know, what's the ecosystem being built there or that you're seeing grow?
Yeah, with the FAMCO initiative, that's the big question we're asking is like, how are we going to do this? And when you think about investors, ultimately, the film business is film business. I think someone was like, there's a reason that the business part is twice as long as the film part, is that it's that much more important. Is ultimately we're selling products and we need to make money. And so with the FAMCO initiative, a lot of what we're thinking about within all of the spaces in, all of our spokes of our flywheel is that money isn't just coming from one source anymore. You can't just go to the festival and get it bought and picked up by a network and off it goes, or a studio, off it goes. We're asking that big question. And one of the things that we're doing as we explore that is to help educate the people within the Colorado film industry about the business part of the film business, and also the motivation. So one of the questions is like, why can't the state just give us money for our film? And it's like, well, let's think about the motivations of those investors. That funding from the state is for economic development. It is under the Office of Economic Development.
Yeah.
In the state. And same for Oregon, I believe, right, Tim? And so the state is not just giving money because they like to see films made. They want tourism and they want jobs created here. And so we as filmmakers and producers need to show that in order to get an incentive. But ultimately, the incentive is just to get the money in the first place. The incentive isn't the money funding part. And so how do we help educate producers here? And we've come up with a bunch of different initiatives, platforms and programs that we can do to get the money from private investors or private funds, from grants, from the government, and how do you put together a good budget and then a good funding package, as well as a package for the film of who do you attach and who's in it, what stories do you tell, so that it can be a viable product. And so that's one of the big things that we're trying to break down, and it's a moving target because we're in the middle of the chaos and disruption. But I think it's really good that we're having these conversations and pushing to connect everyone to talk together between the state, between private money, between businesses like mine, so that we can all move in the same direction and work together ultimately.
I would echo that too, meaning that it's very narrow in terms of the filmmaker has to do everything, but at the same time, the structures around that have become very collaborative. Like there's a bunch of local organizations that we talk to and work with all the time that we try to support. In addition, I talk to my colleagues in Washington, Montana, and Utah almost quarterly because we want to compare notes on what we're doing, and we adjust our programs based on what we talk to each other about. And the reason that group is together is because we're the same size. We have the same types of incentives. It doesn't do us much good to talk to California and New Mexico because they're so much bigger than we are, so right sizing and adjusting with collaboration and partnership, and then also bringing grants that aren't overlapping and conflicting with each other, but combining with each other. That's also part of the collaboration.
Can people work across state lines? Is there collaboration that can happen sort of in geographies?
I mean, it depends. Yes, they can, but they're not going to get an in-state incentive for out-of-state work, because as Shauna quite rightly pointed out, our metric is job spending and tourism. That's what we're looking at. And so I can't be incentivizing somebody working in another state, even if they're working on an Oregon project, and I can't incentivize Oregon people leaving Oregon to go shoot somewhere else. That said, where I'm sitting, Washington is 3 miles away, just on the other side of a river. So there also is a sort of fundamental thing where, well, what if they have to go across the river to shoot for a little while? Or what if they have to, well, we could probably figure that out. However, because we're in this weird existential place, we don't have right now we're trying to, as I said, build the plane as we fly it. And so conversations with Washington are, yeah, we could figure that out, but not quite yet. We got to get there. Yeah. So I think the future is regional collaboration. And I do believe that it's possible in terms of incentives. But right now we're just trying to figure out what our slice of the pie is and how can we maximize that to our best degree, because we have to ultimately sell that to a legislature every year or two and make sure our programs stay on track, because they could take it away at any time. So you're constantly playing the politics as well as trying to do what you can for the individual.
Yeah. Shauna, what are some of the ideas that have come out of the spokes for like ways there could be diversified funding streams? One's this education aspect, but in terms of unlocking money, brands, I don't know, local businesses, is any of that sort of like replicable or buildable to fill a gap there?
Yeah, so in project development spoke, where it's basically like we need to make sure that we're getting money that goes into our ecosystem in the film industry here. And so we are working with people around the state to create the Colorado Producer Incubator, which is to train local producers to be business people and also to train them how to work in today's industry and where you can sell. And so all of this is, we've been doing the town halls and leading the kind of workshops, and people are going, I see myself there, how do I get involved? So these are not things I'm leading personally or the CFBA is leading, but we're helping empower. So that's a big one, is the Colorado Producer Incubator. We're partnering that with what we're kind of calling the Colorado Catalyst over Sundance's, kind of modeled after Sundance's Catalyst, of investor and filmmaker matchmaking, of once we've trained the producers, let's also educate the investors and find places where we can connect them. And then we are also in talks with various people to create a Colorado Film Fund of, okay, the state can only do so much incentivizing. Could we partner with these investors that we've educated, and instead of them investing in one film, could they invest in a Colorado Film Fund that then goes and funds projects, but they have a stake in all of it, so that we can raise the amount of money you could make back. And all of that, right, it's going to take a lot of work and time for us to put these things together, and then people need to be behind them. But in theory, right, those are the types of things that we would need to set up to unlock private money and connect filmmakers with investors. And especially since the budgets are shrinking, it's not as much to make okay, it's $1 million film. You're not taking as much risk. If you're an investor that wants to put money into films, you put $1 million, but then you're putting it into a film fund and you're investing in 10 films. And so that's the model that the community and the leadership has come up with. And these initiatives are now starting to get rolling as people step up to lead them.
I mean, I think that's an unlock there, though, because you have, in Oregon and in Colorado, you have famous brands, you have and companies and organizations have been there forever. You've got Nike, you've got Intel, you've got beer companies, I assume, in Colorado. There's got to be sort of people that care about the local element, but then also want to tell stories. So it does seem like a natural thing. Does this exist in other states, like the Film Fund model?
Not that I know of, and not that I've seen. Film funds exist, but not in this model. And I think this was kind of an original idea as we put it into this framework that the leadership came up with, that was really powerful. And I think the brand side of it too. One piece is, you mentioned Sundance, which is amazing, but they're not here. They're Sundance, and they're a global organization helping filmmakers all across the world. They're not here to invest in Colorado filmmakers.
Unless you require it.
Yeah, but we're calling it the Sundance effect, where it's really lighting a match to spark and fan the flames of a lot of the other activity and excitement in our state around the film industry. And so we're like, how do we grab onto this in this moment. So the other initiative that's already begun and we're gathering sponsors for is the Colorado Creators Lounge, which will be a lounge specifically at Sundance to introduce ourselves to the global community that's going to be coming to our state in January. And so how do we really celebrate the brands that are here, the filmmakers that are here, and the work and creators that it's being done in the state, and then show it off by having a really warm welcome of delicious craft beer and hot chocolate or Celestial Seasonings tea. And you can come and relax and meet our film commissioner and the other regional liaisons that we have for the state. And so that's another thing that came out of these leadership conversations, is to say, how do we rally around something? And so that Colorado Creators Lounge was one idea that I had that I was like, okay, I'm doing it. That's the one I'll own.
Cool. We have questions for us, but Tim, anything else you want to say about, I mean, we've talked about like how it traditionally works, where it goes, what happens to the art when there's the squeeze a little bit. Was there any final thoughts on that? Like, where does the art go? Or is someone setting up a tent here for?
One comment is sort of the large brands, the Nike, the Intels, the Coors, you know, those things. The problem we have right now is there's so much insecurity with what's going on in the broad sense that everybody's kind of going, don't touch my stuff. And there's been so little public investment from grant side that everybody's scrounging for whatever dollar they can get. Right. And so, you know, we have a large player in the advertising community called Wyden and Kennedy. They do all Nike's campaigns, and they should absolutely have a crossover into, you know, product. But at the same time, right now, they're just like, how do we get to the next, how do we get through this? And so the conversations at that level are somewhat hard to come by at the moment because they're just not thinking that broadly just now. They're really just looking, they're narrowing, you know, how do we survive? Nike in particular is like, how do we survive this next year, you know, or two, you know, and that you know, the tariffs are just, you can't predict them. You don't know what they're doing. And how do we do that? So it just becomes a difficult conversation in the short term, but in the long term, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, but also like the responsibility for like building the system as we want it should come from the state, the people, the ground up. It shouldn't be dependent on the private parts of it. But that's where the question of like, how do we need to rebuild this, or what is the reality that is possible is the real question. But
well, and states are suffering more than anybody because there were so many cuts at the federal level that impacted states. Like we went into the last session with a $1.5 billion shortfall purely because of the big, beautiful bill. So there was that panic, like, and we're a state that doesn't have sales tax, which is a positive for us, meaning people don't have to pay sales tax, but it's a negative in terms of revenue. So you're constantly also having that argument of how do we fit into a place where they're just trying to cut all the time, you know? So that's another piece of this conversation that's tricky because I would love the state to do a whole bunch of stuff, but at the same time, the state's only going to do this for us and they're not going to move that. And as long as we make that as good as it possibly can be, they won't take it away from us. But trying to make this into this is going to be a little hard in the short term.
Shauna, we're dependent on you. The coalition of all filmmakers from across the state coordinating their efforts to create new models for prosperity for all. Thank you very much, Colorado.
That's why we have to team up together because the state plays their part, but there are many other pieces and aspects for funding that we can definitely go after.
Cool. We have questions, so let's bring some of them into the room here. We'll put them up on the screen. Question for Tim. We are an agency and we produce medium and small scale commercial spots in Oregon. Are there plans to include commercials in the Oregon incentive? This is that question of like the private versus, or the product versus the art, I think.
Yeah. So the short answer is commercials do get our green light incentive. So that is one thing. The second thing is absolutely, we are looking into including commercials in a broader sense, as we are also having a conversation about what content is at this point in time. And those traditional silos are not what they were. So absolutely.
Interesting. Some of the best films I saw last year were branded films. You wouldn't have known it, but there was a brand behind it. Question for both Shauna and Tim. What would make the biggest difference in growing your state's film economy right now?
Yeah, I think for us, it's really funding for films. Like as I outlined the ecosystem for everyone, if we don't have money flowing into the system, there are no jobs anywhere to be had. And so a lot of our conversation is that people are like, well, I'll come in and I'll build studios. We need infrastructure. And my argument is in Colorado, our producers are amazing and we're scrappy. We've made things work for a little bit and we can make it happen. We don't need the infrastructure. We don't need the extra stuff. If the money will come in, we will create the things that we need. And businesses like mine, if money is flowing and I can get consistent work, I will build the infrastructure, right? I will grow my infrastructure. And so for us, really, truly, it's funding for projects.
Yeah, same. If we could have a consistent workflow that provided, jobs on a more consistent basis, we wouldn't have the sort of anxiety of where my next job is going to come from in a freelance market. And yes, it's a freelance market, but at the same time, consistency and a little more predictability would help a great deal.
I mean, are we saturated at this point though? So Hollywood existed and then they existed and then went and created communities that have, like, as a result of the money moving around, like North Carolina developed and then Colorado developed. And so is there actually too much development for the amount of work that exists? Or is there potentially enough to go around?
No, I think like I said, I think we have to adjust to what's being made. I think, yes, we could always use more money, especially in incentive programs. Absolutely. And we get that question all the time. When are we going to increase it? And I'm like, well, whenever there's more money available. But at the same time, we have to be looking at content as a shifting target as well. And so we have to be sort of saying, how does this fit in? And I think that goes back to my earlier point as a small, in our statute, there's a list of things that I have that I can use as criteria. And so by broadening the scope and actually being more flexible with what type of product is being made, we can bring our incentives to that. But at the end of the day, we have a limited amount of funds. So at some point in time, those are going to run out. And we're going to have to say, sorry, we don't have it. Some states that happens sooner rather than later. Some states it doesn't. I will also say that in terms of incentives, I think there are many. I actually wrote a thing on this. There are many incentives, and understanding how they work is really important. So, for example, we're a 25% cash rebate. So you get that within 4 to 6 weeks after you file with us. If you're in New York, for example, it could take 3 years for you to get that. In Georgia, it takes 18 months, and you have to sell it in Georgia through a broker. So you're going to get a discount on the sale, and you're going to pay a broker. So your 30% rebate in Georgia is going to become a 25% rebate that's paid 18 months later. So understanding your cash flow is really important on small projects. And I would say that's one of the things I try to help all our projects with all the time is they're like, why aren't we 30 or 35 or 40? I'm like, well, we're cash and you get it faster. So do the math on the interest and also finishing your project and cash flow. And you'll find that it's more valuable to have 25% cash rather than 30% in a sellable credit. So that's another point I think that's really important to sort of figure out as you're talking about financing and you're talking about states and what states do.
And both of you actually just said that the incentive, it's not like that's actually to pay back the investors. Like you actually need the money before you go there to make the film, because the rebates and or the cash back is going to pay back what you need to already have from other environments. Like that it is a business to make a film. Okay, do we have anything? All right, so from LinkedIn, where do you see seed money coming from to even get to a green light to a commitment letter from a state film office, for example?
It's a really good question, because we do require full financing before we actually go to contract. I'll review a budget at any time, and I'll review a budget as many times as you want me to before you're even financed. That's fine, so you at least know what's going on. But we do need some kind of proof of financing commitment before we physically hold money for it. And it has gotten very diverse in terms of where things are coming from. So I will see screenshots of people's private bank accounts. I will see crowdfunding, accounts. I will see grants. I will often see letters of commitment from a third-party investor. So it is pretty broad, and I'm pretty open to seeing those things. As I said, I started out as a, producer, financier, salesperson. So I know what these things look like. And so I absolutely have seen a pretty wide swath of where different things are coming from. And I usually have a pretty open mind as to how it's working and where they are in terms of the smaller projects, for sure.
And in Colorado, you need 80% proof of 80% funding in order to even apply for the incentive. Or I guess to qualify for the incentive, you need, like you said, a bank account with at least that 80%, or a contract or a letter. And I think some of the things that we talk about is there are 3 different types of investors. And I made this up, so that, like I suppose you could argue with me, but there's the head investor, the heart investor, and the fan investor, where the head investors are working with experienced producers that know how to make money with their projects. They're coming in and they're taking a risk and saying, I bet I could do something with my money, and it's extra money because this is such a risky industry. So the head investors are working with experienced producers. If you're a first-time producer, you probably won't find a lot of those. The heart investors believe in what you're working on, and they believe in the impact of your film. In the doc world, that's a lot of the investors that we're seeing are just saying, I love that you're working on this topic. I want to put money toward that, and I don't care if I get it back, but I do want to walk the red carpet, and I want to be a part of this. It's so neat. I'm in a theater or whatever. And then the fans, I think that's where the creator economy comes in, is that some investors just love you. And if you can build fans for what you're doing, they don't care what you're doing next, and they don't care that the money is coming back to them because they want to be a part of it. And I think as a first-time filmmaker, if you can sell the heart and the fans, I think that's where you can start to get the funding. And think smaller and go do it. Like, just get out there. If you can raise $30,000, get all the favors and make it happen. Don't even worry about incentives yet. Just to begin the process of creating. And I think that, as Tim said, we're seeing that spread where, like, there's nobody in the middle anymore. If you're earlier in your career, or you know where to get those cheaper films sold in the end, you can go and find less for people that are really those heart and those fans.
Okay, thank you both for an enthralling conversation on everything from the very specifics of 25% cash back to the insightful ways to think about investment, to the history of how it works and how it could work and the potentials of how it could work. Since this was on LinkedIn, there is the opportunity for folks to continue commenting on the event. And if they do, maybe Shauna and Tim can pop in, or we can pop in and follow up that conversation there. But for now, I would like to thank you both for coming. We will send this out to everyone at the end. And if you are making films or shorts or any kind of branded stuff, since we mentioned that as well, you can reach out to my team. Our extended entry deadline is March 27th, so the end of this month. And we would love to see all of your work. We don't fund it, but it could win. It could win. So thank you very much. And I'll see both of you all later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.